No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live episode number 56. And to support our brand new independent news venture, hit subscribe right now. Turn on your notification bells too. So, how does Reform UK intend to transform from an insurgent political force based around the charisma and historic energy of Brexit King Nigel Farage to a genuine political party ready to take control of the UK from Downing Street in 2029 or before? And what is the actual plan to make Nigel Farage Prime Minister? Well, in my digest next, I'll explore the massive opportunity that is all there for the taking for Reform UK as they gather for their first conference in Birmingham since 5 MPs entered Westminster and they won millions of votes in that game-changing general election. Then, Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice joins me for an in-depth exclusive interview to answer all the criticism of his party, including from the right. So how are they preparing for power? Why was Ben Habib axed as Deputy Leader? Was it really down to that Julia Hartley Brewer interview about stopping the boats in the Channel or something more sinister? Did Nigel Farage boot him out of his job as leader? And is the party actually going to ban supporters of Tommy Robinson, even just those folk who simply attended the Uniting the Kingdom March? You can register to join Outspoken right now at www.outspoken.live. It is a safe space, free of censorship, and your support at just £5 a month not only gives you extra content every weekday, it also allows me to continue making this independent daily news show. But now, let's go. So can Nigel Farage become Prime Minister by 2029? A lot of people said I was crazy when I predicted this outcome before a single vote was cast in the 2024 election that resulted in the decimation of the failing Conservative Party and an unenthusiastic vote to send the corrupted and lying two-tier Keir Starmer into number 10. After less than 3 months of this absolute shower of champagne socialist shit delivered by Labour, you know, let World War II veterans freeze while a billionaire donor buys his wife designer clothes, I have actually never been more convinced that this will be a failed one-term administration. A senior Conservative donor told me the other day that they genuinely believe Slippery Starmer will be the first British Prime Minister to be airlifted from Downing Street for his own safety. Now, that might be hyperbole, but the hypocrisy that we've seen from our new leader is genuinely astonishing. Not to mention his decision to shut down any discussion, even about legitimate concerns of illegal immigration, as far-right snake oil. That's rubbish, of course, but Starmer can only keep the lid on this bubbling anger by locking up folk who sent angry Facebook or X posts for so long. And this is why Reform UK, Reform UK is coming for Labour. As even The Spectator, an organ of the Conservative Party that campaigned forcefully against reform and Farage at the election, acknowledged this week. So they said that when this year's election campaign began, 40% of the country did not know what reform was. So Farage sees his 4.1 million votes as a fraction of what might come with more awareness, and I think he's right. So The Spectator said, with Labour already polling below 30% and Keir Starmer's personal poll ratings plummeting, the opportunity is clear. A poll by JL Partners suggests that 1 in 4 Labour voters is considering backing reform. And Farage told The Spectator, quote, "If they come to us, that's half the number needed to win the next election." But the biggest questions facing Reform UK as its members gather in Birmingham today for its first conference since 5 MPs entered Westminster may well be how to keep its base happy. Deputy Leader Ben Habib, a favourite of the grassroots, was brutally sacked after the election in a decision that infuriated many members. Tommy Robinson supporters being purged from the party, as are good honest candidates who are having hope not hate conduct offence archaeology on their expos, sometimes from over a decade ago. And then this week, Nigel, in an interview with GB News pushing him towards right-wing policies, turned on the idea of mass deportations.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it. At the moment, it's a political impossibility.
But is it your ambition?
No. I'm not going to get dragged down the route of mass deportations or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, people are always going to come and go, and we are a country that's engaged in international trade, and we have relationships around the world through the Commonwealth, etc. But yeah, we have to aim at a balanced migration policy.
But net zero still means hundreds of thousands of people coming into Britain, immigrants coming into Britain. Isn't that too many?
It may well be, but we have to start somewhere.
Trump says in America that he wants mass deportations. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants are in Britain at the moment. Some estimates say the number could even be in, 1 million plus. So do you support deporting all of those people?
It's impossible to do. Literally impossible to do.
In terms of the atmosphere in Britain, are you concerned that there is a rising level of anti-white hatred?
I'm just concerned about a deeply divided society.
But as true Conservative media boss Chris Davies posted on X, having finally got immigration to the top of the political agenda, Nigel Farage has come up short. Sit on the fence and all you get is splinters in your backside. No ambiguity from UKIP. Start the deportations. 10,000 foreign criminals for starters. Now, in that interview, which, as I say, has proved controversial, he also backed away from the concept of demographic change being a concern.
Do you think that immigration represents a major threat to Britain from a demographic perspective? So in the last 20 years, the white British population has declined from 87% to 74%. Is that a concern of yours?
No, that's not a concern of mine. What is a concern of mine is, in many cases, the lack of integration. We see that writ large by the new kind of politics that's emerging, sectarian voting along religious lines. I never really thought I'd see that in England in my lifetime. I mean, I grew up.
Now, the popular young Conservative commentator Connor Tomlinson said of that, Nigel Farage tells Stephen Edgington that demographic change caused by immigration is, quote, not a concern of mine. It is a concern for young men most inclined to support you, Nigel. England is not just an idea, and new arrivals have no inclination how to assimilate. Now, I think it's important that the right stays united, and I am concerned by how quickly folk have turned on Farage. At the same time, Nigel needs to realise that some hope is required, and also serious ambition, to turn this country around. Mass deportations are not just being considered by Trump now, but European states turning to the right too. And with Meloni in Italy, Le Pen in France, the AfD in Germany, and Reform UK in Britain in power, which, look, I think is highly possible by the end of the decade, there would be a chance to change the game by bringing back populist leaders serving who I call the silenced majority and not the elites. So there is everything to play for. Now, to discuss the plan to put Reform UK in Downing Street in depth, let me bring in the party's deputy leader, Richard Tice, for our uncancelled interview. Richard Tice, really good to see you. You know I always start with the difficult question, maybe the most important question, I'd say, in this case. Can Nigel Farage be Prime Minister in 2029?
Definitely. And that's the plan, that's the ambition, the objective, and some remarkable work is going on at the moment, building the professionalism of the party, taking it to the next stage, which I'm delighted about. We've got 150 plus branches established, more happening as every day, every week goes on. It's hard to keep up with the numbers, but it's truly remarkable. The pace, the ambition, and it's very exciting.
It is. So, of course, conference today, it is remarkable. I think remarkable is the word, given that in your initial plans, the election wouldn't have even taken place by this point. So what you had to do in such a short period of time was a mammoth mission. But in the end, I think it's almost worked out for the best, because it's not just about numbers, is it? I think what Reform UK have proven in a very short time is actually, if you utilize social media in the right way, if you're loud and proud, you can make a huge impact at Westminster. And it actually shows how lazy and useless a lot of the MPs for the Uni Party really are.
That's the point. I mean, I've spoken now almost about over 15 times in just, I think, 4 or 5 weeks of parliamentary time. And you have to sort of work it out and judge it. And sometimes you have to sit there for ages, bobbing up and down. But the social media clips from that are absolutely huge. That's what we're really, really good at. And people can see that we're active. We're making a noise. We're asking the challenging, difficult questions that, bluntly, the two main parties, particularly around issues like net zero, that they're obsessed about, they don't want to talk about. And the Labour Party doesn't want to talk about immigration. So, I think we're making a huge noise. We may be 5 in number, but I think we're making the noise of 50 to 100, frankly, already.
You are. I feel at the moment like Reform UK is the moral opposition. And you know the issue for me, Richard, that really clarified that? It was after the Southport massacre. Because no major politician in the main parties wanted to discuss what my viewers were talking about, what I was thinking about every single minute of the day, what the silenced majority was horrified about. And even now, Richard, we are still made to feel as if we are, far right, as slippery Starmer keeps on saying, or racist, just to want to have a necessary conversation about the perils of mass immigration, this ongoing invasion of our southern border. And it was after Southport, I think, where you could see the impact that Reform UK will have in this parliament, because yes, you were absolutely shot down by the mainstream media. Nigel Farage became the #1 target, predictably, but you were still speaking out.
But let's be clear, Dan. But let's be clear, the mainstream media and the Labour Party, they were looking for the slightest opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But we immediately condemned the riots and the hideous acts that went on. But you can criticise and condemn whilst also acting as a critical friend, asking important questions. And what happens if politicians don't ask important questions, then speculation runs riot and runs amok, I should say, underground. It's a bit like boxing, for example, as a sport is much better as a regulated professional sport than those who want to ban it, in which case it's done underground. And there's many other examples like that. So being able to ask questions, which is all Nigel did, and it's all I've done, in terms of when these incidents happen, we should be told very quickly the truth about if someone has been arrested, we should be told the truth about it. And I think there is a genuine concern that may not be the case. And
we still don't know. We still don't know. And this is what infuriates me. It's the cycle, isn't it? Tragedy happens. In that moment, we are told, don't be angry. If you're angry or if you ask questions at this moment, you're somehow impeding on the grief of the people who are involved, which is absolutely not the case. I mean, I think about those 3 little girls who were bludgeoned to death at a Taylor Swift dance class every day. They have never left my mind, and I'm sure they haven't left your mind or my viewers' minds.
Completely.
But it's about why it happens. And the problem is then the man in question, Axel, is charged. And by that point, we're told, well, if you talk about this or if you find anything out, he's not going to have a fair trial. And actually, you can be held in contempt of court. You can go to jail. Certainly I can. If I was to talk about the circumstances surrounding him on this show today, you might be able to in Parliament. But it's very difficult, isn't it? Because then by the time he's in court, it's 2 years on. And most people have by that point forgotten.
Let's be clear what's going on here. The establishment wants to shut down analysis, discussion, and debate about the level of criminality from those who come to this country, whether it be legally or illegally. And whereas in other countries in Europe, they actually they analyse and publish this data by nationality and by legality. Whereas this country, there is a deliberate process of cover-up and suppression of the data. And why do you think that is? If the data was no problem, it would be out there. I think we've got to accept that there is a problem here. And I, for example, whenever there's a horrific incident, a violent incident, a stabbing with whatever weapon, machete or whatever, we saw the incident with the soldier, the uniformed soldier, just a few weeks ago. All of it, and every time, it's not terror, it's mental health. It's not terror, it's mental health. How do they know so quickly that? I'm sorry, but I want to ask the question, that I want to be told the truth. And the British people have a right to be told the truth. And that's, we ask that question, and maybe it is every time an extraordinary coincidence that it's always mental health. And maybe, you could legitimately say anybody that tries to stab and kill someone is mad. And that's a legitimate line. But we all know that the truth is deeper than that. And we have to be able to talk about it. I just think that's really, really important. So, and there's another thing that really troubles me. We've talked a lot about two-tier policing, two-tier justice. We've seen it big time. And when Nigel asked the question in Prime Minister's questions of the Prime Minister about two-tier policing, the Prime Minister completely ducked it, just avoided the question, didn't want to talk about it because the truth hurts. And we've got a situation now, for example, I was the first person to defend the police officers who were brutally assaulted in Manchester Airport. Those individuals who carried out that vicious, violent attack on police officers, to the best of my knowledge, they've still not been charged. Many weeks on, the video footage is crystal clear. It doesn't need a rocket scientist. It's as crystal clear as the video footage of the riots on which they arrested people, charged them, and locked them up. Well, if they can do that for people who carried out those riots, why can't they do the same when you've got the video footage for individuals that assault police officers? Assaulting a police officer, whether it's in a riot or whether it's in Manchester Airport, is the same criminal act and should be dealt with in an equal way. And we've got a more mad situation, Dan. Now, the IOPC and the Greater Manchester Police leadership, what are they doing? They're actually carrying out a leak inquiry into who leaked the footage that exonerated 110% the police officers. So in other words, they actually want to cover up the truth. They want to throw their own brave police officers trying to protect people, to save lives, to stop terror activity. They're literally trying to throw those police officers under a bus. And I have to tell you, I've said it before and I'll say it again, it feels to me that if you are from an ethnic minority and you carry out an assault on a police officer, you get different treatment than if you are a white person that assaults a police officer. That is two-tier policing. That is two-tier justice. That will get me into all sorts of trouble from the lefty lot, but I'm just calling it out. I'm telling it as it is.
We can see it.
Totally unacceptable.
I mean, the problem is, Richard, we can see it every day. It does feel like after the so-called riots, there was a war on the working class, specifically the white working class, and that was driven by Starmer. And there's been so many examples of this. I mean, how on earth could Mohammed Hassan avoid jail altogether? Now, Richard, he is the Muslim man who saw 3 women at a petrol station, was furious about the fact that they were not dressed in traditional outfits, that they were dressed in a Western manner, showing their ankles, for example, and he attacked them. He physically assaulted 3 women at a petrol station brutally, and he escaped jail. At the same time, Richard, we see Julie Sweeney in prison for 15 months. Now, this is the mother of 3. grandmother of 3, actually. She's a carer to her husband. She made an artful Facebook post, Richard. It was an artful. I don't support the Facebook post for 1 second. It was on the day of the Southport massacre. She was absolutely emotional about what she had seen. She deleted the post within an hour, apologized unreservedly. She's no risk to the public. So we have Julie Sweeney in jail, Mohammed Hassan, who viciously beat up 3 women at a petrol station, on the streets.
And it'll be interesting to other examples. I mean, that's a good example. There was the example of I think it was a Labour councillor who at a demonstration was calling for people's throats to be cut or to be killed, whatever he said. And so is he
has pled not guilty, interestingly.
Well, how can you plead not guilty to something that is plain there for everybody to see on video? I think we've actually got to have a proper discussion about when you've got video evidence of somebody, is in a sense, that is your evidence. And maybe you could have almost like a sort of a fast track to justice and a decision when you've got that, because you don't need to take hundreds of witness statements and everything. It's there for all to see. And what we do know is that fast justice is the right way forwards, and proper sentencing and people serving the whole sentence, that serves as a deterrent. And in the same way that it's a deterrent to the ridiculous rioters, well, it can be a deterrent to other people who carry out criminality. So let's have one rule for everyone, shall we, as opposed to different rules for different types of people from different communities, different colour skin, and so on. That's where we're at in the United Kingdom.
Now, Richard, you mentioned just a moment ago, and I think it is really worth taking a look at, the moment last week when Nigel Farage went toe-to-toe for the first time in PMQs with Slippery Starmer, because it was a very direct question from Nigel, and there's 2 interesting things I think people should look out for, and I'll get you to react off the back. First, the reaction from Labour MPs the moment Nigel actually talks about 2-tier policing. He's booed. And secondly, as you pointed out, the complete failure from Starmer to address the question in any way.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we witnessed some extraordinary celebratory scenes outside Britain's prisons where, in some cases, serious career criminals were released. And this to make way for, yes, rioters, but equally those who've said unpleasant things on Facebook and elsewhere on social media. Does the Prime Minister understand there is a growing feeling of anger in this country that we are living through 2-tier policing and a 2-tier justice system?
I'm angry to be put in a position of having to release people who should be in prison because the last government broke the prison system. And the Prime Minister was repeatedly warned. He had his own release scheme. He was repeatedly warned that he had to adopt the scheme that we put in place. The former Justice Minister said if we don't do it, we'll have to get down on our knees and pray. The police chiefs made it absolutely clear in a letter to him before the election that he needed to take action, saying that they wouldn't be able to discharge their duties and saying the risk was loss of an ability to detain suspects. That means, Mr. Speaker, an inability to arrest people committing offences. That's how bad it was. And they warned the Leader of the Opposition that further delays until after the general election will increase the risk significantly. What did he do? He delayed and increased the risks.
Nigel Farage.
So, Richard, how long can Starmer go on not addressing immigration, not addressing 2-tier policing, not addressing the invasion via the southern border?
Well, firstly, Dan, what was interesting about the Prime Minister's response to Nigel's question there was, in a sense, Nigel said, do you understand, Prime Minister, people's concerns? And the fact that the Prime Minister didn't answer the question actually provides the answer, which is that he doesn't understand. And even if he applied himself to it for a short moment, he wouldn't want to understand. And it's quite clear. I asked the Justice Secretary just the day before, why don't we release and immediately deport there's some 10,000 foreign nationals blocking up our jails and our prisons. And she coughed and spluttered that, well, we were sort of doing that process. Well, we're doing it in a matter of hundreds. But if you deported 8 to 10,000 of those folk, not only do you free up all the spaces in prisons, but you save the British taxpayer billions of pounds. And that would carry the support, I think, of millions of voters. But they don't seem willing and able to do that. They seem to have adopted a completely, in my view, misguided cop-out approach. So
yeah, I played that exchange on the show. I thought it was a brilliant question. And again, she didn't answer the question. She said, well, we are deporting people.
Yeah.
They're not. Quite obviously, they're not.
And this is what's frustrating in the House of Commons that we're learning, is that so often, much of what is said, good questions are asked, and the responses completely duck the question. But one or two, I think, sort of exceptions to that rule. When I asked a question of the Health Secretary, where's streeting, actually, he responded constructively, accurately to my question in a very clear way, accepting some of the points that I was making. So that's what it should be about, as opposed to just ducking it and fibbing and waffling, which we're getting. And bluntly, we're absolutely sick and tired already of this sort of parrot mantra, 14 years and a 22 billion black hole. I mean, there is some truth to the 14 years. They're not going to be able to use that for year after year. But as for this sort of black hole, frankly, I mean, that's a figment of the imagination of their union paymasters as they secured a massive pay increase for people with no requirements to improve productivity. And what be very clear, Dan, what's happened here is that the government, in their sort of very short-sighted, easy soundbite to say, well, by accepting the pay demands, we've stopped the strike, and that's cheaper than the strike going on. What they don't realise is you've actually compounded on a sort of inflationary basis salary increases. You've unleashed a whirlwind of inflation-busting salary demands from other elements of the public sector. And I fear that within a couple of years, we are going to be in a financially very difficult place indeed. I've been saying for some time my concerns about the economy, the lack of growth, and we've had evidence now where the growth, not only in June, but also in July, the last 2 months from the ONS, zero, flat, niente, zip, no growth whatsoever. So we can see the direction of travel on this.
We can. It's utterly terrifying, actually. And I think, Richard, the thing that has probably disturbed me most is that the solution that Starmer has seemed to found to the problems that he quite clearly was suffering politically in the aftermath of the Southport massacre, because I'll never forget, by the way, and I don't think many people talk about this because, of course, the mainstream media want Starmer to be their hero. But do you remember, Richard, he turned up the day after in Southport and he was heckled by locals. And they were locals. They were furious. Now, that's a really bad news for a new Prime Minister. But what Starmer's solution seems to be is censorship. So there is a crackdown now on free speech. And your chairman, Zia Yusuf, who we'll talk about later, actually, but he wrote last week, the Soviet-style systematic persecution of his political enemies will be Starmer's legacy. He will be a one-term PM. They are very strong words. I actually agree with it. But how do you feel about the fact that Starmer seems to believe the solution is censorship? The solution is regulating the internet. The solution is finding a way, using technicality about second jobs for MPs, to boot Nigel Farage off GB News.
Well, of course, I'm the guy that launched the word Starmageddon back in January at our press conference.
Very good.
And everybody's using it now. It was the Daily Mail comment sort of headline the other day, I think on one of their front pages. The truth is, what we've actually got is Starmageddon on steroids. And it's worse than anybody's sort of possible fears. What you've just talked about, censorship, sort of authoritarian approach, is classic socialism. Mm-hmm. And actually, he's shown incredible political naivety Because if his response to the riots was to say, now look, we don't do rioting in this country, we do lawful protests, it's completely unacceptable, you're going to face the consequences of the law rapidly, and there's a separate point the Prime Minister could have said, which is, we understand people are concerned about high levels of legal and illegal immigration, and we're going to address them. Now, if he'd adopted that approach and said that we don't do violence and rioting in this country and that will be properly and robustly dealt with, he'd have been in a completely different political position. He'd have gained huge support. And then if the response from the Chancellor when looking at the books was to say, we've uncovered some numbers we're pretty uncomfortable with, that's why I've delayed the budget till October the 30th, because we've really got to know what we're looking at here and make sure that there's some proper growth in line. Again, rather than terrify 22,200 of my constituents and millions elsewhere in the country, they'd be in a completely different political place. And it's remarkable. People who've been around Parliament and well advised, as you know, some of the Labour advisors, whether we like their policies or not, are very competent, smart people. They would be in a completely different place. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, indeed, it is. Okay, I want to talk about Reform UK because it is your conference today. There's a huge amount of excitement around this party, but there are also challenges too. So before we look ahead, can we just look back a little bit to the election campaign? Now, you saw how much the mainstream media want to destroy your party and destroy your candidates. As a result, Richard, you had to, I guess, throw people under the bus. Now, do you think that was the right thing to do? Because I would argue, having spoken to some of them, that there were some of those candidates who maybe had expressed something inartfully on social media 10 years ago, but actually deserved to be stood by. And certainly some of the comments were no different to anything that I would have been saying on my GB News show or talk radio show in regards to the World Economic Forum and that sort of thing. So I worry about this concept of offence archaeology. And I worry sometimes that actually the response is to immediately distance yourself from these people rather than saying, no, we stand by this person. We maybe don't agree with one of the comments that this person made on social media 10 to 5 years ago. Do you see the point that I'm making?
I do, but I'm very clear, Dan. I could see the moment months ago when the press started to look at our candidates. You know, I deliberately put the candidates' names on the website because I wanted to see the sort of scrutiny and that would come. And look, the right to free speech is a critical part of the democracy, and I'll defend that. But that actually doesn't give you the right to stand for a political party that wants to make progress, that wants to get millions of people to vote for you. And there are two different things there, and I think we've got to be open and honest about that. And you cannot defend the indefensible if you're asking people to look at you as a serious, credible political party and to get millions of people, as I say, to vote for you. So, and I also wanted to set a marker for everybody else to understand where we're at. And I don't resile from that one iota. And we came under a huge amount of scrutiny. And look, some of it is ridiculous. And if someone wrote or said something daft 15 years ago, I mean, you get a longer sentence for sort of saying or writing the wrong thing that length than you get for murder, frankly. But that was the level of scrutiny that we were coming in from. But where we're coming at it from basically some of the right-wing press. I thought the Daily Mail's behaviour during the campaign, we knew it would be rough, but I thought it was reprehensible, frankly.
Oh, they were completely outrageous.
I believe, I have information to believe that they were operating in cahoots with Hate Not Hope. I'm so sorry, Hope Not Hate, whatever they're called.
The most hateful charity in all the world. Very ironic.
The boss of whom, by the way, carried out the greatest act of misinformation for which he's had no sanction whatsoever. That's another example.
Yes, exactly. He claimed, just in case people don't know, this is a guy called Nick Lowles. He claimed that there were acid attacks taking place against Muslim women during the so-called riots that directly resulted in violence on the streets. And no arrest, no consequence, because he's on their side.
Correct. So we had that. And look, the media came at us hard. What they didn't say in the cause of even-handedness during the campaign was that the Green Party had to withdraw the whip from 10 candidates, no less, during the campaign, which was more than we did. So,
and for, by the way, the types of actions that their candidates were calling on resulted in effectively the call for Israel to be destroyed. So,
literally, some of them calling for genocide too. Absolutely, just totally two-faced, barefaced, ridiculous bias from the media. So we had an onslaught, and of course, we made mistakes. Everybody does. We learn from them. That's why the actions of what's going on now, in terms of taking it to the next level of professionalism, of vetting, of growth, of branches, is so important. And I'm massively supportive of all the great work that's being done by the team on that.
Okay, can I ask a very specific question, though? Because I know a lot of my viewers will be wondering about this. So Tommy Robinson hosted the Uniting the Kingdom March, and it was a very peaceful event, and lots of folk went, and actually lots of Reform UK supporters went. There was no trouble whatsoever. Are you saying that if you attended that Tommy Robinson Uniting the Kingdom march, or maybe posted on X in support of that march, that you would not be able to stand for Reform UK in the future?
I haven't said that, but we have a list of entities that if you've been a member of, then that would prevent you from being a member of Reform or Standing. We're very robust on that. We want nothing to do with Tommy Robinson, and we want to aim to be a credible challenger, to be the next governing party, and that requires bluntly a level of hard work, professionalism, and credibility that we've never seen before from from a party outside the main two. So that's where we are. That's what we're doing. That's where we're going, and we're not going to be hijacked by anybody in that ambition. Because bluntly, this country is in serious trouble, Dan, and a serious trouble. We are heading towards financial and social and cultural bankruptcy. So we have to present a very clear, bold, reforming alternative. And if we get that right, it's not easy. We'll continue to make mistakes, but if we keep learning from them, try not to make them again, then I think we will gain more and more support as people see that the two main parties, their solutions are completely wrong. And just specifically on that, my hunch is the next election, whenever it is, will be a combination of an immigration and a net zero election. Because if I'm right about the madness of net zero, the greatest financial acts of lunacy for this economy, then the energy bills won't be coming down. People's utility bills, heating bills, they won't be coming down, and we'll be less competitive as a nation. And everybody will say, what's this all about? And let me tell you, when you go to other high growth countries around the world, whether it's in Asia or whether it's in the Middle East, like Abu Dhabi and Dubai, the Emirates, those places, high growth, the two words that bluntly are not mentioned, net zero. They're after growth. They're not focusing on cutting the nose off to spite their face. Whereas we are under what I believe is the most dangerous man in Britain, Ed Miliband, who I've come across robustly in the House of Commons a couple of times now, and we will continue to do so. I genuinely think that
Yeah,
his
he's
plans.
floating under the radar
Well,
while
I think
literally bankrupting us.
Yeah, I think he's in our very faces, bankrupting us. I have to say, it makes my blood pressure go up when I'm sitting in the chamber and he's there ranting on. And for a very, very, very few of us, it's really only Reform who have stood up in that chamber and challenged them on this madness. I've challenged them twice now on steel, the fact that thousands of good steel jobs and communities, those jobs are being sacrificed on the altar of this religion of net zero. And it's a catastrophe, an absolute disaster for them, for their families, their children, their communities, and our reliance on the ability to produce the strongest virgin primary steel. But that's it's actually as much the fault of the Tories as it is the Labour Party.
Well, no, it is. And I call it nut zero. And I completely agree that at some point this is going to be a huge issue for your party, because if you look at the Conservative leadership candidates, not one of them has had the balls to actually say no to nut zero. They have tried to say, maybe we'll do it in a safer way. No. You've just got to say no, which is something that Reform UK has done. Just one other issue looking back, Richard. I want to clear up the whole Nigel Farage becoming leader situation. Now, I've always been very clear and said publicly that you wanted Nigel to be leader, because that is always what you'd told me, quite frankly. You'd always been very open about the fact that you were desperate to bring him onto the campaign. But you know that there is this narrative out there that Nigel in some way ambushed you during the campaign and you weren't aware with what was going on. So do you just want to clear it up once and for all what actually happened?
The likes of Andrew Pearce in the Daily Mail wrote a complete load of tripe, balderdash and garbage as part of the Mail's campaign to smear us. And frankly, what he wrote was just pure lie. But it was actually for months and months, literally. I mean, since the back end of last year, when Nigel came back from I'm a Celebrity, I'd been answering every question about what Nigel wanted to do. I said, look, the more help he can give, the better. And I'd been urging him to come back, and I was delighted when he sort of made that crucial decision, and only he could make that decision. All of it around were urging, but the fact that having made that decision within a week, he'd had milkshake acid thrown at him. He'd had a concrete block thrown at him. That proved why it was such a difficult decision for Nigel to make, because it was a life-changing decision, and he wanted to make sure. And the reality is we were all ready to roll. And it's one of the reasons we're convinced that Sunak called the election to everyone's surprise early, because he heard that Nigel was coming back. And that's, in a sense, if they had waited later, then Nigel would have come back in the summer as we'd agreed and as I wanted. Then we'd have had a longer run up along the runway and would have secured a lot more votes and would have got more seats. So that's crystal clear. So I hope that clarifies it. And yeah, there's a whole load of nonsense written about that. But you just go back through the media things. I've said for many months that the more help Nigel can give in whatever capacity, excellent.
He's committed to this now, right? This is a 5-year project. He's not going to decide halfway through, actually, I want to go and launch a TV show in America or help Trump if he wins the White House. He's 100% committed.
Oh, I think 300%, and that's why it's such a big decision. Because, as you can imagine, that's what I wanted to know. It's what everybody wanted to know. Was that he was wanted to do it for the long term, and he's made that very clear to everybody, which is fantastic. But it is, as I said, it's a life-changing commitment that he's made, and that's why, in a sense, all of our jobs at Reform is to back that commitment by working our absolute socks off to try to make him Prime Minister whenever the election is called in 28, 29.
Do you think Nigel deserves or needs more security protection given what happened to Trump and given the very obvious target that the left have put on his back?
Yeah, security is a massive issue for Nigel. I suspect he's probably, apart from the Prime Minister, or possibly more than the Prime Minister, he's one of the most exposed individuals in the country. So, yeah, security is a big concern. We obviously don't talk about the operational details behind that, but it's a sad fact of life for someone's so well known, so high profile, but indeed equally for all MPs. Security is taken very seriously. The parliamentary authorities are really robust and brilliant about the standards and procedures and recommendations that they have. We are where we are, and it's a difficult place, particularly actually for female MPs. I think there's an added level
of peril, indeed.
Of peril and brutality, yeah.
Indeed. Now, look, you know that I have been incredibly impressed with Reform UK since the election, but I am a critical friend, Richard, and so I have to ask you about something that I thought was really mishandled. And you would be, I think, surprised to know how many of my viewers were absolutely distraught about this decision, and especially the treatment of a man who had been incredibly loyal to you as Deputy Leader of Reform UK. I'm talking about the sacking of Ben Habib, which was done brutally and done without communication. It seemed to me that Nigel was very unhappy with his comments to Julia Hartley Brewer on talk about leaving illegal migrants to drown in the Channel. But wasn't there a better way to do this with Ben? Wasn't there a way where he could have still taken on some sort of role in the party, that he still could have had a speaking spot at the conference? I mean, he was your deputy. You chose him to be your deputy. He is an acutely intelligent man.
Yeah, look, there's no question that interview with Julia was... Julia did a very good interview. She did a good job, and it was challenging. But actually, what he really meant was completely misrepresented, and I defended that. And our policy has always been crystal clear: pick up and take back. It's the only policy that will work. Look, things change. Obviously, when we had people in Parliament, it was right to change things. We had to, this ambition to professionalise, and I couldn't do everything. Nigel can't do everything. So, and when you're in Parliament, you sort of need a deputy leader. So look, we made some changes. Whether different people and things, whether we get communication perfect every time, well, we can all sort of debate that. But look, Ben he's worked incredibly hard. He's very committed. He's a good friend, and we all move forwards. And I hope that he will continue to remain very committed as much as he can. But he's got business interests to pursue as well, and in a sense, that level of commitment it impacts on some of one's outside interests, and that is also a fact. But no, look, the truth is, senior people in Reform have got a lot of personal support. Ben's got a lot, Rupert's got a lot, Lee's got a lot. I think I've got some, and Nigel's got a lot, and David Bull and various others.
Yes. And you've got this new rising star, who no one even expected to make Parliament at all.
That's right. And sorry, I'm so sorry. Zia's as chairman has got a growing amount of support, massive respect for the time and effort he's committing, which is huge. And so more and more people are listening and hearing and reading and watching what Zia writes and says, and that's just we just push on, and that's how we have to do it.
Richard Tice, do stand by, because of course one of the biggest questions is over the Conservative Party. Is Reform UK going to do a deal? And what about Suella Braverman and Priti Patel? Surely the only way that they can actually win their seats at the next election is if they do defect to Reform. So Richard, back in just 1 minute. First though, It's the best time of year. Football's back. We're talking Premier League in the UK and in the US NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays. With that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups. So this is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV and making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy everyone ridicules in the group chat. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench. Let's be honest, nobody wants to fumble their grooming routine. So that's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue ear and nose hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that will help keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will help you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster. With precise trimming capabilities, it's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. Now, no one wants a surprise ear or nose hair making a guest appearance on game day, so the Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming gang. And today, 2 free gifts if you buy the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo, and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag. Premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading over to manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken today at checkout and you get 20% off and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So let me repeat, www.manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken at checkout and you will get 20% off. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way. But now, back to the show. You raised female MPs and their security earlier. There is a gaping hole. You know I don't do identity politics ever, Richard. But for me, there are 2 really obvious people that could really help reform UK overnight. 2 former Home Secretaries, Priti Patel, Suella Braverman. Actually, the fact they're diverse women, I would say, is completely beside the point. But you need them in Reform UK, don't you? They're born for your party and they've been completely rejected by the left-wing Tories.
Well, as you say, Dan, we don't do identity politics. We want great people.
But they're great people, aren't they? I mean, they're great people.
They are great people, and we have a laugh in Parliament and we tease each other, and that's sort of part of it. And indeed, I can be tease and be civil outside the chamber with people from the Labour Party.
But I mean, are you having active talks with Conservatives?
Yeah, look, lots of people ask me that, Dan, and my answer is the same. It's a fairly sort of standard answer, but I'm not giving a running commentary on any chats, texts, telegrams, WhatsApps, signal messages or text messages or anything that I have with anybody, because it's vital that as and when someone does want to talk, then they know that
it's a confidential process. No, I understand.
It's absolutely paramount.
Let me ask in a different way. They're not about individuals. Do you expect the Reform UK caucus to be bigger than 5 MPs before the next election?
110%, about 200%.
Because the thing is, these Conservatives surely have to realise, and by the way, I've said this to Suella and Priti and about Suella and Priti, I predict they will not win their seat if they stand under the Conservative banner at the next election. So there's also a degree of self-preservation, isn't there?
Well, look, we will definitely have more than 5 MPs by the time of the next election, whether it's by-elections, whether it's people realising that we're actually the home of common sense from the Conservatives or whatever. And the more the merrier. We've just got to push on and just keep doing what we're doing and keep bashing on. But in a sense, you know, we're focused on what we're doing, candidly. And if we get it right, get the policies right, make enough noise, then I think more people will join us.
Yeah. Well, in a matter of weeks,
people that join us. There are various people for example, Dan, who just lost their seat.
Yeah.
High-profile Conservatives, who I think also are analysed, thinking about things very carefully. And so let's wait and see. But Nigel has said before and continues to say something's going to happen on the right of centre of British politics. There'll be some shape of realignment in some shape or form of that, we've got no doubt.
Well, that's my final question, actually, Richard, and arguably it's the most important. Are you open to some sort of arrangement with the Conservative Party? Now, I know you don't know who their leader is going to be yet, but is there a possibility, I'm not even talking about a full merge, but is there a possibility of some sort of electoral pact, some sort of deal where maybe you stand down in seats that are where the Lib Dems are challenging the Tories, they allow you to be unleashed on the red wall? I mean, is there some sort of pact, or are you still going down this path of the only way to victory is full destruction of the Conservative Party?
What we're doing is just focusing on our own growth, our own branches. We've got a lot of work to do. And let's not get ahead of ourselves. The next election is 4.5, 5 years away. So there's plenty of time. Who knows what happens when? And my main prediction is that whoever wins the Conservative leadership will most unlikely be the leader at the time of the next general election. I think that's sort of...
that's a guarantee, I think.
And the thing is, look, at the end of the day, we want people with us who believe in the philosophy of conservatism. The Conservative Party does not own that philosophy. In fact, the truth is they abandoned that philosophy, and that's why they're in the pickle they're in. So, and competition's a good thing. It's actually part of the Conservative philosophy. And if that makes us all perform better, well, so much the better. And so, but we just push on. I'm really not that fussed about what they're up to.
Yeah.
What I do know is you can't trust what these leadership candidates say. I mean, take Kemi Badenoch, for example. When she was a minister, was she expressing concerns about China or the ECHR?
No.
Or net zero? No, not at all. All of a sudden now that she's out of power, she's trying to be a hawk on these issues. And I'm sorry, I just can't trust people that operate like that. It doesn't sit well with me. We've got a very strong conviction on some very clear policies, and we take some flack for it, but we are convinced that we're right on it.
Well, yeah, and as I always say these days, Richard, Margaret Thatcher would now be considered too far right for the Conservative Party, and she would probably be a member of Reform UK. So I think you're completely right. The whole idea of what conservatism is changing. I think you've made a massive impact personally in a very short space of time. It's like you've been unleashed, actually. I think maybe it's better for you being deputy because you've got more time to focus on these issues that really, really matter. And I appreciate the time today, and good luck at your conference tonight.
Thank you very much. It's a great event. Huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah, I'm going to be tuning in. Thank you, Richard. Now, very sorry to say there is no uncancelled after show today, but that is because I am heading right now to the Together Declaration 3rd anniversary event. But the very good news is that is streaming live. So I will post the link on my X page via the Together account on YouTube, I think. And honestly, there's quite a lineup tonight. Neil Oliver, Claire Fox, Catherine Burblesing, Zuby, Ben Habib, Bev Turner, Alison Pearson, Dominic Frisby, Matt Letizia, and Winston Marshall. I'm joining a panel to talk about the importance of turning away from the MSM. But don't worry, the after show returns on Monday because you know it's very important to me that we have a safe space not patrolled by big tech where censorship and control runs deep. So that's why I've launched www.outspoken.live, our membership section where you will get half an hour of extra content. So all you have to do is sign up at www.outspoken.live. I am back Monday at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Please do subscribe right now on YouTube and Rumble. Spread the word about Outspoken. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. Have an amazing weekend.